Hey there, it's Jessica, and welcome back to the English Pro Podcast. If you learn at least one new thing in today's episode, subscribe to our channel. It really helps us reach more English learners who could benefit from these tips. Have you ever used a word in English and gotten a weird look from someone? Or maybe you were super confident about using a particular word, and then someone gently corrected you, and you felt like crawling under a rock? Yeah, I've been there too, and it's honestly one of the most embarrassing moments in language learning. The thing is, English has so many tricky words that seem obvious but actually have different meanings than what we think. These aren't random vocabulary mistakes. These are words that even advanced English learners get wrong all the time. And you know what? It's completely understandable because these words often have similar meanings in other languages or just seem like they should mean something different. Today, I want to save you from those awkward moments by going through 10 English words that are commonly misused. We'll talk about what people think they mean, what they actually mean, and how to use them correctly. By the end of this episode, you'll feel so much more confident using these tricky words, and you'll avoid those embarrassing mix-ups that we've all experienced. Let me tell you why this happens to all of us. When you're learning English, your brain is constantly trying to make connections. You hear a word that sounds similar to something in your native language, or you see a word that looks like it should mean something specific, and your brain files it away with that meaning. The problem is, sometimes your brain gets it wrong. Here's the thing, these aren't stupid mistakes. They're logical mistakes that happen because English is weird and confusing sometimes. I mean, why does terrific mean something good when terrible means something bad? Why does invaluable mean very valuable instead of not valuable? English doesn't always make sense, even to native speakers. Let me share some of the most common words that trip up English learners. I've heard these mistakes so many times, and I've made some of them myself. First, let's talk about actual and actually. This is a big one that I struggled with. Many people think actual means honest or real in the sense of being truthful, but actual means real, as opposed to imaginary or theoretical. For example, you'd say, the actual cost was higher than expected, not I'm being actual with you. If you want to say you're being honest, you'd say I'm being real with you, or honestly, I think. Here's another one that gets everyone. Eventually versus possibly. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, eventually I'll go to that restaurant, when they mean maybe I'll go to that restaurant. Eventually means it will definitely happen, but at some point in the future. Like this, I'm studying hard, so eventually I'll pass this exam. It's not about possibility. It's about certainty over time. Let me tell you about sensible versus sensitive. This one confused me for years. Sensible means practical and reasonable. A sensible person makes good decisions. For example, it's sensible to bring an umbrella when it might rain. Sensitive means easily affected by emotions or easily hurt. Like this, she's very sensitive about her cooking, so be careful what you say. You know what word tricks everyone? Discuss. So many people say discuss about something, but that's not how it works. You discuss something directly without about. You don't say, let's discuss about the meeting. You say, let's discuss the meeting. I used to add about all the time because it felt more natural to me. Here's one that native speakers mess up too. Borrow versus lend. When you take something from someone, you borrow it. When you give something to someone, you lend it. For example, can I borrow your pen? Means you want to take and use their pen. But can you lend me your pen? Means you want them to give it to you temporarily. The confusion happens because in many languages, there's just one word for both actions. Another tricky one is fun as an adjective. You can't say, it was very fun. That sounds wrong to native speakers. Instead, you say, it was a lot of fun, or it was really enjoyable. Fun is usually a noun, not an adjective. Like this, we had so much fun at the party, or the party was so much fun. Let me share one that I see everywhere. Advise versus advice. Advise is a verb, it's what you do. Advice is a noun, it's what you give. For example, can you advise me about this problem? Or, can you give me some advice about this problem? I used to mix these up constantly because they sound so similar. Here's a word that surprises people, comprise. Most people say comprised of, but that's actually incorrect. Something comprises its parts, or it's composed of its parts. For example, the team comprises 5 members, or the team is composed of 5 members, not the team is comprised of 5 members. This one is tricky even for native speakers. Another one that gets everyone is lay versus lie. You lay something down, it needs an object. You lie down yourself, no object needed. For example, I'm going to lay the book on the table, but I'm going to lie down for a nap. This one is so confusing that even native speakers get it wrong sometimes. And here's one more that I hear all the time. Interesting used incorrectly. People often say, I'm very interesting in this topic, when they mean I'm very interested in this topic. If you're interesting, it means other people find you fascinating. If you're interested, it means you find something else fascinating. Here's what I learned from making these mistakes. Native speakers are usually very understanding. They might look confused for a second, but most of the time they figure out what you mean and gently correct you. The key is not to be embarrassed about it. Every language learner goes through this, and it's actually a sign that your English is getting more advanced. You're trying to use more sophisticated vocabulary, which means you're growing. The other thing I realized is that making these mistakes actually helped me remember the correct usage better. When you use a word wrong and someone corrects you, you remember that correction much better than if you'd just read about it in a textbook. Let me give you an example of how these corrections might work in a real conversation. Imagine someone learning English talking to a native speaker. Learner: I'm very interested in this job, and I'd like to discuss about the requirements. Eventually, I might be a good fit. Native speaker: That's great. Just to clarify, you're very interested in this job and you'd like to discuss the requirements, and you think you could possibly be a good fit? Learner: Yes, exactly. Thank you for the correction. I always mix up those words. Native speaker: No problem at all. Your English is really good. These are tricky words that everyone struggles with. See how natural that correction was? The native speaker didn't make a big deal about it. They just modeled the correct usage and moved on. That's usually how these conversations go in real life. So where might you encounter these tricky words in real life? Let me give you some scenarios. In job interviews, you might want to say, I'm very interested in this position, rather than I'm very interesting in this position. You'd want to say, I'd like to discuss the salary, not discuss about the salary. And if they ask about your availability, you might say, I could possibly start next month, rather than I could eventually start next month, unless you're certain you'll start then. In everyday conversations with friends, you might borrow someone's phone or ask them to lend you money. You might give someone advice or ask them to advise you. You might find something fun or say you had a lot of fun doing it. At work, you might attend meetings, not assist to them. You might say a project comprises several phases, or that it's composed of several phases. You might describe yourself as sensitive to criticism or as someone who makes sensible decisions. Here's my tip for avoiding these mistakes. When you're not sure about a word, try to think of it in context. Does it sound right when you use it in a sentence? If you're not sure, try using a simpler word that you're confident about. It's better to use simple, correct language than complex, incorrect language. Also, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. If someone corrects you, ask them to explain the difference. Most people are happy to help, and it shows that you're serious about improving your English. If you found this episode helpful, you might want to check out episode 15, where we talked about confusing English phrases, or episode 18 about common mistakes that change meaning. Both of those episodes complement what we discussed today perfectly. Don't worry if you've been making some of these mistakes. You're not alone, and now you know better. It's totally normal to mix up these tricky words, and the fact that you're listening to this podcast shows that you're committed to improving. Every mistake is just a stepping stone to better English. Remember, the goal isn't to never make mistakes. It's to learn from them and keep getting better. Native speakers make word mistakes too sometimes, so don't be too hard on yourself. If you learned at least one new thing in today's episode, subscribe to our channel. It really helps us reach more English learners who could benefit from these tips. This is Jessica, and you've been listening to the English Pro Podcast.